Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My unparalleled co-host is Laura Blackwell. And I hope that you're all healthy and safe and taking care of yourselves and your loved ones and in the sort of waning last gasp of the pandemic, hopefully. We started Story Hour. I started Story Hour during early lockdown, and the idea was just having a place where my friends and I could go and read our work to each other. Really, my original intention was this sort of very small, kind of cozy little group, and it has grown way, way beyond expectations. So the deal here is we turn to an ancient and time-honored form of entertainment, which is sitting around the fire telling lies to each other. So every week we've got two authors, about 30 minutes each, and we do exactly that. Tonight, we are really happy to have Cassandra Khaw and Richard Kadrey. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Each week, we ask our guest authors to suggest a worthy cause, which we shamelessly shill on their behalf. So if you're fortunate enough after hearing this to be in a position to help financially, that's great. If not, that's fine too. Spread the word or just sort of be aware that this work is going on in your communities and that it's important. So Cassandra is reading tonight.
I'm suddenly panicked that I forgot.
I have you down reading for Fair Fight, Richard. So we'll get to that in just a second.
All right, sorry. It just
no worries, man. Cassandra is reading tonight for lezosecouranimal.org.
Yes.
/animaux/chat. That's the Animal Rescue Network, and somebody will paste that URL into the chat window so that you don't have to pretend to read French. But the Animal Rescue Network was founded in 1994 by former members of the SPCA. The intent was to establish a shelter without euthanasia, basically, as an alternative for injured, abandoned, or lost animals. The organization is made up entirely of volunteers, and thanks to them, abused or abandoned cats are given a second chance. So that's awesome. Being a cat person myself, it's wonderful. Richard is reading tonight for Fair Fight, which is founded by the remarkable Stacey Abrams. They promote fair elections around the country, encourage voter participation in elections, and educate voters about elections and their voting rights. Fair Fight brings awareness to the public on election reform, advocates for election reform at all levels, and engages in other voter education programs and communications. Fairfight.org. So Cassandra Khaw first appeared on Story Hour this past May, and we are really happy to have her back as a repeat offender. They are an award-winning game writer and former scriptwriter at Ubisoft Montreal. Khaw's work can be found in places like Fantasy and Science Fiction, Lightspeed, and Tor.com. Their first original novella, Hammers on Bone, was a British Fantasy Award and Locus Award finalist. And their novella, Nothing But Blackened Teeth, published by Nightfire, is now a USA Today bestseller. So congratulations.
Thank
Cassandra.
you.
Welcome back. And the floor is yours.
Awesome. I'm not sure what content warnings to give this particular story. If you are remotely familiar with anything I've written, assume there's some amount of gore, a fair amount of violence, and disturbing imagery.
What's not to like?
The title of the story is Don't Turn on the Lights. Stories among girls. It don't matter whether they're lightning cut into stone or whispered over the crackle of a dying flame. No story in the world has pedigree. They've all been told and retold so many times that not God himself could tell you which one came first. Yes, every story in creation, including this one, especially this one. You might have heard it before. There was a girl once. Her name was Sally. It could have been any other name, really, but let's go with Sally. It's solid, round-hipped and stout, the kind of Midwestern name that can walk for hours and don't mind it much when the sun burns its skin red. Anyway, Sally was maybe 18 or 19, some freshman at a local college. And like every teenager, she sometimes got behind on her schoolwork. So one night, she took all of her books and went down to her dorm's basement, telling herself she'd study until the dawn brindled the sky in gold and claret. Halfway through, she realized she'd forgotten about it. And back up she went, feet making no sound at all on the gold carpet. Was it thick? Yes. Lush like nothing else. It had to be, or what happened next wouldn't make any sense. Silent, she padded along until she reached her room and opened the door. Click. It was black inside. No lights at all. The curtains were drawn. You couldn't see the glow of the distant town, but that was okay. Sally knew the room like the map of her palms. Slowly, she felt her way along the walls to her bed. Slowly, she realized there was a smell in the air. Pennies and salt. There was a sound in the air too, breathing, rasped and ragged, heavier than anything she's heard. Sally knew the beat of her roommate's breath. This wasn't it. And maybe she might have said something if it wasn't for the itching under her skin, something that whispered, this isn't right. So Sally didn't. It was late and she was tired. It was probably just her imagination. Having made the decision, she got what she needed and clicked the door shut behind her as she left, just as something began to drip, drip, drip. Damn faucet, she mumbled as she swayed back down to the basement. The next day, Sally went for exams. How did she do? Truthfully, it didn't really matter. She took her examinations and then she went home, feet crunching across dried autumn leaves and cobblestones. Into the dormitory, she went up the spiral staircase, unease laving its way down her spine. There are far too many people out and about, the faces bright and afraid. But that wasn't Sally's problem, no sir. Someone else could go worry about that. All she wanted was to sleep. Sleep wasn't in the cards, though. Hell, I don't know if she ever slept again. I know I wouldn't be able to. Because when Sally finally walked all the way to her room, pushing up past co-eds in their flower-printed pajamas, she found police tape and policemen. And a smell in here. Pennies, salt, a stink of dried urine and shit, and a sound in the air, a drip, drip, dripping, oozing between the noise of the walkie-talkies. And a sight like nothing anyone should see. Her roommate, cut up like beef, words scrawled on the wall above her head. Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights? That's the popular version. The socially acceptable one, as I like to say in polite company. After all, it's one where no one really is at fault. Not Sally, not the roommate, not even the butcher who sliced up the poor girl. You can't pin a sin on a thing with no face, can you? But there are other retellings, crueler ones, or truer ones, I guess, depending on who you're asking. And since you did ask, one of them goes something like this. Sally was 18, maybe 19, but she might as well have been 72. Hers had not been an easy life, although isn't it for me to explain why? That's another story and also not mine to tell. But she survived it, or at least some part of her did. The girl that shambled into college was 1 part Sally, 3 parts grit, and 9/10 rage. The world hadn't been fair to the poor child. It could have been worse. It could have been Sally who had taken a murderer to her bed. Sally who had pushed down onto the covers with palm over her mouth. Sally who laid there twitching as someone carved a smile under her chin. Now, and I bet you're wondering, how'd Sally know about all that? Because she was there, of course. As with every variant of the story, Sally was out too late for one reason or another. Realizing she'd forgotten something, she stumbled upstairs to her room. In the popular version, all she heard was breathing. a drip, drip, dripping to tell her that something was wrong. In this one, her roommate whispered, "Sally, help." And she froze. There was a smell in the air, pennies, salt, and ammonia reek. There was a sound in the air too, a gurgling noise, a shlick of steel peeling through skin. Someone kicking against a bulk too big to move. I don't know why she walked away. Why she didn't flick on the lights and scream for the police. Maybe she was scared. Maybe it was late and she was tired and certain that was all in her imagination. Maybe Sally thought to herself, I ain't dying for someone I barely know. Whatever the case, she left. And well, you know how the rest of the story goes. Someone bore us both with its sin. Was that one of the meaner retellings? Hell no. See, no one likes much talking about it, but everyone's got a little blood on their hands. Most of the time, it's metaphorical. The little lie that gets our siblings in trouble, the broken heart we blame on someone else's lacks. Everyone is guilty of a few small sins. What Sally might have done, it wasn't evil per se. A little selfish, maybe. But can you blame her for being frightened? Imagine being on the cusp of freedom, full of hope for the first time in your life. Would you give that up for a stranger? Would you lay down and die for them? Yeah, I thought as much. I digress though. Stories are defined by a beginning, a middle, and an end. In more literary circles, people talk about denouements and layers, textures, the way a word can transcend into a synesthetic experience. By the end of the day, it all comes back down to those two things: a beginning, a middle, and end. You'd be amazed as to how much detail gets lost in between, how a good storyteller can make you forget the bits that don't make sense. What happened that night? What drove Sally down to a drafty basement when she could have found sanctuary in the library? If you think about it, none of that makes sense. Every college has its reading rooms, its communal spaces. So why a basement exactly? Did she really go there for her own accord? It's possible. It's possible too that someone decided that'd be a mighty fine way to terrify the freshmen. No better method for earning respect than kidnapping someone from your beds and throwing them into the waiting dark, a hood over their heads, the concrete cold against their legs. Maybe that someone was Sally's roommate. It's possible. Maybe this incident wasn't the first of its kind. It's possible too. Maybe as Sally sat crying in the basement, too afraid to call out, something wormed out of the shadows, something old, hungry, smelling of salt and pennies, like the taste of blood in the back of your mouth. Maybe the thing said to Sally, "What is your heart's desire?" And Sally, too full of grief to think straight, replied with something that she would regret. That's possible. Everything is possible in a story. Now, is that what really happened? Don't ask me. There are only two people who really know, and one of them might not even be called Sally. Truth is, I don't think anyone gives a shit either. With stories like this, all people want are their bones. People like putting their own spin of things. It could have gone any number of ways, this tale. A lot can happen between the main events, you know. Did Sally run straight out of the room? Did she listen for a while? Did she tell her roommate to be wary, to lock the doors and watch out for strange faces? Did she know the assailant? Was there an assailant? Who knows? Still, before you go, let me tell you the version I like best. It's one that few know and fewer care for. But it makes the most sense to me. Or maybe I just like my stories bloody. Sally was 18, maybe 19, a freshman like any other, full of hopes and newborn dreams. The future had never seemed so bright. There was just one problem. Because of circumstances, she had to share a room with someone she knew, someone she didn't rightly like. It might have been her sister. The records aren't clear on that. A cousin, possibly. Or her mother's best friend's favorite daughter. Who the hell knows? One way or another, it was someone with whom Sally just had to play nice. And she tried. Oh God, let me tell you, she absolutely tried. In the beginning, Sally did her absolute damnest best to be civil with that other girl. But you'd only drown a poor horse if you force it to drink. The relationship took no time at all to ripen to hate, soured by the need to suffer each other's proximity. Both of them jostling for space neither could afford. Still, it was almost bearable for a while. Then, Sally's property began to disappear. Her food, her clothes, research texts, little odds and ends. Then Sally's father died, and her roommate used the news of his suicide against her, ransoming Sally's reputation. It got worse from there. Sally stayed quiet. But you know what they say about people like that? And this wouldn't be so bad if Sally was ordinary, but she wasn't. No, sir. She had a bit of witch in her blood, which is to say that she had a little too much. Sally had just enough power to talk to things the wise leave well alone. So she did. One day, Sally decided she had enough, and she went down into the dark, carrying the hairs from her roommate's brush. True enough, there was something there waiting for her. She fetted those long black strands, one at a time, saying nothing throughout. Only smiled when the thing politely asked for more. The next day, she came back with nail clippings. This went on for a time. One night, the thing thought to hunger for one specific taste. It asked Sally, "Where'd you get all that fine food?" "Upstairs," she said. "Upstairs in the light?" "Yeah," Sally replied, licking her dry lips. "I could show you where." "Huh," the thing said. "I like that. But I don't like it much when someone watches me eat. It's one thing when it's little nibbles like this. It's another when you're talking about a feast. Do such creatures really talk with such eloquence? Who knows? They do in this story." "That's fine," Sally said, rising to her feet. "You can keep the lights off." Thus decided, the two left the basement. Sally followed the thing up the spiral stairwell, her footsteps quiet, its footfalls silent. She followed it into her room and sat down on her bed, quiet as a mouse, As the thing began its work, Sally stayed true to her word. She kept it pitch dark, not even the glow of the distant town to light their way. Thankfully, her imagination was enough. When the sound of chewing stopped, when the air was the stink of piss and flayed meat, when there was nothing left to do but leave, Sally got up and walked away. The thing followed behind. The next day, she came back to find her room transformed into a slaughterhouse, the air thick with button black flies. There was an apology scrawled in her roommate's blood. Sally had to hide her smile. Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights? No, she thought. It would have been so much fun to watch. And we're done. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. Beautifully written, too. It was really a great late October tale.
Thanks.
So typically, the transition between authors, we just sort of chill for a few seconds and a little silence and just let the story sort of ring a little bit before we move on to the next work. So I'm going to do that. Thank you for the transitional dance. That was great. Our next author is Richard Kadrey. Richard is the New York Times bestselling author of the Sandman Slim supernatural noir series, which was included in Amazon's 100 science fiction and fantasy books to read in a lifetime. And Sandman Slim is currently in development as a feature film. Some of Kadrey's other books include The Grand Dark, The Everything Box, Ballistic Kiss, and Butcherbird. I actually remember Metrophage, Richard, which kind of maybe indicates my age, but that was a great book too.
Thank you.
Richard also writes screenplays, and for comics such as Heavy Metal, Lucifer, and Hellblazer. So take it away, Richard. Welcome.
All right. Thank you very much. It's going to be hard to follow Cass, but I'm going to give it a shot here. This is a story called The Tunguska Event. Old Anna began her story over tea. Mikhail Vasilyevich Baltrushko, the young master, had been smuggled to Canada just before the Great Patriotic War, she said. Soon after the German surrender in 1945, he returned to the family's matter here in Irkutsk. Tony Lanson looked at the old weathered woman. He wasn't sure how she found him at his hotel. He hardly came into Irkutsk, preferring the clean air of the Siberian taiga. But the old woman had insisted on speaking to him because he alone, an American scholar, might understand. I had been the head servant, Anna continued, and the young master, he was kind enough to keep me on, though I was old even then. I'd come east with the family when we left lovely Kiev for awful Siberia. When he returned, the young master had little interest in the family shipping business, so I mostly left him alone to his studies. He had arrived from Canada with crates of books and boxes of special inks, papers, and odd instruments I'd never seen before. I was just happy to have someone to take care of again. Mikhail Vasilyevich disappeared into his father's old study for weeks at a time. When I bought him his dinner, he soon stopped eating anything but a single evening meal. I found the floor littered with reams of parchment, papyrus, and rice paper covered in colored gibberish. What I saw disturbed me. Some of the letters looked like the writing on the old synagogue in Kiev, the one that people had burned. The master would never let me clean the room or remove any of the papers, but he would occasionally permit me to gather them from the floor and stack them on his work table. One night, I boldly asked the young master what the papers were for. Was he writing a book in a foreign tongue? Had he converted to Judaism in Canada? If so, he must keep it a secret, as the locals were backward and clung to old prejudices. I was talking above my station, but I was afraid, and it all spilled out. Mikhail Vasilyevich laughed and drew a clean piece of paper from a stack on the table where he worked. He took a fresh pen, dipped it into crimson ink, then wrote some of the strange letters. At once, a tiny flame appeared above the desk. I remember screaming at the sight, but he showed me that it was safe. He could control the flame he had conjured. Then he licked his thumb and smudged one of the letters from the word he had written, and the flame flickered and disappeared. He said that he learned the true name of fire and was trying to learn the true names of other things. Yes, some of the words he had written were in Hebrew, but others were Tibetan. Still others were Mayan, who he said were a people of the Southern Americas. I'd never heard of those languages, but when he assured me that he himself had not converted to Judaism, I felt better. The young master, always a prankster as a boy, even offered to show me that he wasn't circumcised. That made us both laugh, and I went to bed happy. That night, I dreamed of a whole sky on fire and of angels. One day, Anna said grimly, a German came to the manor. Nothing was the same after that. I hated him on sight with his greasy hair and long, filthy nails. He left the same day he arrived, but the young master became more elusive than ever. He even stopped eating a single daily meal and would only munch some toast every day or two. This was just too much. I wouldn't have the head of the family starving himself while I was running the household. After finding another cold, uneaten dinner outside the study, I opened the door to demand an explanation. Above his work table, the moon circled slowly. I learned to write its name, he explained, beaming at me like a happy child. There was a machine on the table, and he brought me over to see the thing. It was like the typing machines I'd seen the Communist Party clerks and secretary using in government offices. But this machine had dials and wheels and little lights that shone when you touched a letter. It's called an Enigma machine, he said. The German had bought it. It was one of the few that hadn't been captured by the Allies after the war, he said. It had cost him a small fortune. The Nazis were madmen and despots, he said to me, but they were also powerful occultists. The Enigma had written unbreakable codes for the Germans during the war. He said, what are codes? But a kind of secret language which reveals mystery to those with eyes to see. He had conjured the moon by writing thousands of variations of its name on the machine. There was much more work to do, he said, more names to learn. After promising to eat more, he shooed me from the room. I was concerned for the young master, but I didn't want to enter the study after that. I know I should have been more courageous for his sake. Sometimes I peeked at him through the keyhole. Soon, a star hovered near the ceiling, and the moon circled it. Then there were planets. Light poured from the keyhole night and day, and suddenly it was gone. I stooped and peered into the room. It was empty. No floor, no walls, no ceiling. The young master sat typing at the work table as a galaxy spun slowly over his head. That night, the good people of Irkutsk saw strange things in the sky. Swarms of fireflies filled the streets. Ball lightning spooked the cattle. The stained glass of the old church collapsed in on itself. Perhaps a week later, imps invaded the house. I heard them at night tittering as they crept by my bedroom door. In the morning, my kitchen would be a mess. All the sugar and lard would have been eaten, often along with the crockery in which it had been stored. Well, this was too much. I marched straight to the study. When I opened the door and saw the burning sulfur lakes of hell, I, strangely, wasn't surprised. I stood my ground and explained that I simply could not run a proper household with beasts roaming the halls all night. Instead of being angry with me, Mikhail Vasilyevich, he was such a kind boy, came and embraced me. He agreed with me, and over my protests, left for the country the next day. He only took his Enigma machine, some of his books, and the family Victrola, on which he ceaselessly played American jazz records. As much as I hated to see the young master go, I was relieved that the very night he left, the study reverted to its former appearance, and there were no more demons in the kitchen. But things weren't right. My dreams kept me awake at night. I got down on my knees and prayed for peace, but it didn't help. When I read my Bible for comfort, I finally understood the fear that haunted me. If the young master had gone so far as to conjure up the stars in hell, the only thing left for him was to manifest heaven itself. This was inconceivable, the monstrous blasphemy of it. There would be no forgiveness for such bloated pride. In the middle of the night, I dressed. I went to the train station to catch the early morning coach to Tachet. Using the remaining household money, I hired a boat to take me to Angara and thence to Keshma. It took another 3 days overland to reach Fanavara, a stinking trading town full of Cossacks and filthy nomads, smelling of sweat and the seal fat they gobbled to keep warm. The boatman would go no further into the wild country where the young master had his izba, not much more than a hut, really. And I had to hire a horse-drawn wagon with the last few rubles I dug from my pockets. Later, I dearly wished that I hadn't found the money and had simply returned to the manor in Irkutsk. Mikhail Vasilievich's izba wasn't far from the village. When the wagon made it through the woods and onto open land, I could see the small house on a rise above us. It was glowing with the pure white light of stars and angels. When we reached the bottom of the hill, the driver stopped, refusing to get any closer. Celestial voices drifted down to us. Stars spilled from the chimney, sailed into the sky, and tumbled back to earth with the light snow that had begun to fall. Meteors streaked across the heavens, more and more until they were a storm. Overhead, a star glowed, brighter than all the others combined. The stars seemed to hover over the little house. I thought of the Star of Bethlehem and wondered if the young master had conjured it so that he could proclaim himself some mad new Messiah. I didn't understand what was happening until the driver pulled me back to his wagon. In fact, the star wasn't hovering. It wasn't a star at all. It was something bright and enormous, and it was falling straight at us. The bright thing, the size of a mountain at least, seemed to fall forever. I prayed as the wagon driver cursed his horse to go faster. When the star hit the young master's house, I closed my eyes and waited to die. But the wagon trundled on, and as I looked back at the mountain, the light was gone, and so was the Abizba. A few last stars shot across the night sky. Snow fell, and thunder echoed from far across the taiga. Farther than that even, Anna whispered, leaning across the table and taking Tony Lassen's hand. The thunder was from 40 years in the past. You see, during one of his infrequent meals, the young master had told me that time and space were the same thing, that one could affect and pervert the other. So, when God reached down to slap Mikhail Vasilievich Boltrushko from existence, for that could only have been God's hand in the sky, the weight of the Creator's wrath had warped space and time. The man God obliterated with a falling star in 1946 had been blown through time to be felt in 1908 near the little Tunguska River. I remember hearing about the event as a girl. Whole forests have been laid low. Lakes have been burned dry in a split second by the blast of the falling star. The old woman finished her story and looked at Tony as if expecting an answer of some sort. The American didn't say a word, but got up from the table and went to one of the crates stacked along the wall. He pushed aside his field notes and collections of local plants until he found what he was looking for. Then he fumbled in the dim light for a few minutes, assembling the contraption. When he came back to the table and sat with Anna, a tinny music filled the room. From the crate, Benny Goodman and his band jumped through a rendition of It's Only a Paper Moon. Anna moved one of her wrinkled hands to her mouth and began to weep quietly. Tony knew how to fudge data in his geology reports to keep the grant money flowing in. But until that night, he had no idea what to say about the stack of old Jazz 78s or the scorched Victrola he dug up in the same layer of geological strata as the Tunguska explosion. He certainly had no idea what he was going to say when he got back to the university. Pouring them shots of good local vodka, Tony silently toasted Baltrushko. Then he took Anna's hand, and in the little room, they began to dance. The end. Thank you. Oh, you're still muted. There you go.
Thank you, Richard. Another fine October story. Gosh, what a privilege it is to host these events week after week. So, Cass, Richard, thank you very much for joining us at Story Hour. Next week, we've got Mina Lee and Lewis Evans. So until then, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and do join us again next week. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.